on Misunderstood. Thank you for joining me. Where are you?
So I am sitting in Lisbon, Portugal.
Oh, that's amazing. But
Yes,
you're from America,
I'm from Rhode Island.
from
I'm
Rhode
from Rhode
Island.
Island.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
how did you end up in Portugal?
That is a long story, but let's see. I was in the fish business in Rhode Island. I actually graduated from college with a degree in database design. It was sort of a hybrid business, computer science thing. Realized that was absolutely not what I was going to do with my life, and then that was after starting a software business and all this, but I was like, okay, this is not what I'm doing with my life. Got a call from a guy that later became my boss and mentor, Peter Murky, Charlie Tuna, as they call him, and he said, "Hey, you want to come sell seafood?" And I thought, definitely not. I basically told him to go pound sand, and he said, "Well, I'll give you $1,000 to come and hang out with me for the day and see what this is all about." Took him up on the offer. And the office was in Newport, Rhode Island, right on the harbor. It's a beautiful place. This was June, and so it was a great place to be for the summer. And so I said, okay, let's go try this out for a few months. And him and I hit it off. And long story short, it turned out I was exceptionally good at sales, and I grew that business. I actually love to this day. I love that business. It's just not as lucrative as my current business, but
Mm.
I absolutely loved that business, every part of it, and almost every part. And I did
Well,
that for,
I'm just curious, what was your day to day of that?
one of the things I loved about it is that business, there was nothing to do after hours, right? So it was like, I showed up at 8 o'clock in the morning, 8:30, and yeah, 8. We started relatively early, and started at 8 in the morning. Basically, first mission of the day was figure out what the price was. Right, it's a commodity business. What's the price? What's the market prices that day for the various sizes, the various origins? We were primarily in the scallop business,
Mhm.
and so it was basically like a fact gathering mission for the first hour or two of the day. And then uh and many of our customers, that's what they were doing, right? And so we'd go out, do some fact gathering, price discovery, and then basically create a price sheet, fire that off to all our customers, and then the next few hours you're sort of servicing customers, and then the back half of the day was basically cold calling new customers.
Oh, wow. And
And
who are the customers? It's restaurants or what?
no, no, no. We were selling, larger quantities. So we were selling to like food distributors.
Oh,
We were
got it.
doing import export of like full containers from China or to China. We were selling to Belgium, France, Germany a little bit, but mostly a lot of import from Japan, a lot of import from China, a lot of import from Argentina, Chile, Peru,
Wow.
Canada, and then just next door to where we were, New Bedford is the largest producer of scallops in America. It's actually the second largest producing seafood port in America. I think number one is Anchorage, Alaska.
That's where I'm from, by the way.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah.
So Anchorage, I think it's number one in the world for in America for dollar wise production of seafood, and then number two is New Bedford, Massachusetts,
Wow.
and so we had some operations up there, but third party, right? So we sat in a beautiful little office on the harbor in Newport, Rhode Island. People think about, I love to kind of tongue in cheek say I was a fishmonger, and I was, but I wasn't touching fish. I
Right.
talked
So
about
you weren't
it.
involved in the packing of it and the icing it and all that stuff. You were
All of our
selling it.
customers, or like most of our customers, believed that we were, because we had our own labels, but there was all being produced and packed by third parties. It was being stored by third parties, processed by third parties, and then we would sell under our label. But we literally were like 5 or 6 people sitting in a little office in Newport, Rhode Island, talking about frozen scallops on the phone all day.
Amazing.
We got
Okay.
into some other, lobster and squid and some other things, but yeah.
Okay. So eventually you get out of that and now you're known as the godfather of domain brokering. So can you tell me how you got from one to the other?
So, um, I we have to actually back up. So in college, right, I was studying this sort of database, computer science, and this was right at the emergence of the sort of consumer internet. So we're in the mid late 90s, and I learned about the internet. And I learned that if you wanted to be on the internet, it started with a domain name. And so, the way I'm hyperactive and I have a million ideas a minute all the time, and it's a gift and a curse. And so, basically, I thought, wow, I all these ideas, I want to put them out on the internet. And to do that, step one, get a domain name. And so I had no ambition or no idea of like, oh, I'm buying a domain name because it's valuable. I just thought this is a ways to a means.
Mm.
And so I just started buying them
And
for all
and I'm
these
sorry,
ideas.
just so that for people listening and for people that do not follow this at all, domain name means website address, correct?
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
URL, there's, people refer to them in different ways, URL, website address. But yeah, domain names, it's like google.com or apple.com.
But totally different than what you're getting when you find your handle on Instagram or Twitter.
Totally different, right?
Okay.
With a handle on a social media platform, you don't actually own it, right? You have a right to use it from the platform, but you don't own it. You can, we've seen this with cancel culture, right? You can be shut down. They can just be like, oh, we don't like what you're saying on that platform, and you're done.
Oh, right. I
Uh,
didn't think of that. Yeah.
Whereas with a domain name, you own it, right? This is, I mean, it's actually it's much deeper than just being canceled. You know, when even if you have a very successful platform, as you do on YouTube or on other social media platforms, uh, you don't own that data. The platform does, right? You don't actually even own that relationship with the follower or with the customer or
Wow.
whatever it might be. The
Mm.
platform does, right? You have a relationship with that customer or with that follower at the pleasure of the platform, and they can terminate that relationship at their will. And if they do so, you don't have the data, and you no longer have the connection. You don't know how to connect back with your follower unless they have another way to get to you. And so I think that's actually a great way of highlighting the value of a domain name, one of the utilities and value points. So anyways, that's what we buy and sell. And at that time, I was just collecting these things with the idea that, oh, it's another idea that I would love to explore or build or launch. And so I was buying things that were around sort of some of my interests and my hobbies and ideas.
Like
And
what?
well, like I lived in Newport in Providence, Rhode Island. So I had some domains related to Providence, and with Newport, I had, what ultimately led me into the domain brokerage business. I had bought these domain names around pata negra ham. Pata negra is Spanish for Blackfoot. And there's a black-footed pig, which is native to the Iberian Peninsula, which is, Spain and Portugal, where I live now. And that ham at that time in particular was the most uh, expensive meat in the world. It was cherished and it could not be imported into the United States. And I had, experienced it in Mallorca, Spain. It's in Balearic Island off of Barcelona, more or less.
Mhm.
And when I tasted it, I was like, this is incredible. This is the best thing I've ever had. How do we not have this in the US? And so I bought the domain names because I thought, oh, I'm in the fish business. I know how to import, products. I'm going to import this in the US to sell it. But I found out that it was actually banned by the FDA. They treated it like they treat French cheese, which is to say that they don't think that it's fit for human consumption.
Wow.
Uh, and so that was sort of that. And I did a back burner. And then one day I'm driving to my office. I had to drive across the Newport Bridge. At that point, I had moved from Newport to Providence. And so I'm driving across the Newport Bridge and I'm listening to NPR radio. And they said that George Bush was about to receive the first pata negra ham ever imported into the United States. They had changed the FDA position and they were now allowing this thing to be imported. And there was one importer in Virginia, and he latienda.com, give him a little shout out. He was a great guy. And he was an importer of like specialty Spanish products. And so he had fought for years to get this approved, and he worked with one factory in Spain to get this factory FDA approved and licensed. And he was the first importer, and he basically had a monopoly, and he was starting to distribute it in the US to all the top restaurants and chefs and whatnot. And so I got to my office and I said, I got to look up this guy, and I got to speak with him. And with solo, because I wanted to buy a ham. Like literally this stuff, I was like, this the best thing I've ever had. I haven't had it since I was in Spain. How do I get a ham? So I called him up and we chatted, and we was kind of talking shop because we were both in the food import business. And as we were talking, I realized he had this real online e-commerce focus, which, e-commerce wasn't like, it was really just starting at that point. This was 2001.
Mm-hmm.
So, or two. And so we got to talking, and I realized, I said, by the way, I own, these domain names all around Pata Negra. I think I had 5 or 6, of the best names around that ham. And he said, I could sort of hear his proverbial jaw drop, and I knew I had a sales guy. I knew I had him. And so he was like, how much you want? And what I didn't know was like, I had no clue what this thing was worth. Is it worth like $100? Is it worth 100 grand? Like, I have no idea. But what I wanted was a ham. And so I said, well, I don't know, but I'll trade you for a ham. And he just goes, done. No, so let me actually back up for a second. I'd already asked him, can I buy a ham? And he laughed at me. He's like, look, my next, like, I don't remember now, but it was like the next 11 containers are already pre-sold. So like, yeah, you can get one, but it's next year. And it's like, I think it was, I don't want to talk out of class. It's been a long time and I don't have the greatest memory, but it was like 5,000 a pound or something, or a kilo.
Oh, wow.
These are like 5-7 kilo, 5-7 pound legs. You buy a whole leg of ham.
Yeah.
Literally is on the foot. The foot is still attached.
Right.
And so these were very expensive.
So they were valuable. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, very valuable. At that time, he had a monopoly, and it was absurdly expensive.
Right.
And so anyway, so going back to the sort of negotiation, I didn't know what these things were worth, but I wanted a ham. So I said, well, I'll trade you for the ham. And it, like, without hesitation, he just said, done. And I thought, oops, I undersold that. And so I was like, and 5 grand. And he goes, done. And I was like, okay, well, I deal, let's do it.
Do you regret not saying you want ham for life?
Well, would have been nice. That would have been nice. I don't know that he would have agreed to that. That would have been a big commitment, but maybe. He was pretty excited to get these names. But he was a phenomenal guy. I try to live my life with almost 0 regrets. I have very few regrets, but he was a very nice guy. And he not only sent me the ham, it literally showed up my door, like it looked like a coffin.
Oh my God.
Big wooden box, like huge. And but he sent me like a case of really good Rioja wine, and he sent me the carving set, the holder for the leg of ham, and the special carving knife. And
point being, he saw the value in the domain and wanted to give you whatever he could to compensate. I think that's amazing. And did the ham live up to the hype coming from America?
I'm telling you, for 30 days, my wife and I, all we did was eat ham. And we ate ham and drank Rioja. That was basically our diet for 30 days. And I think we ate the whole thing in about a month.
Oh my God.
Which is quite a feat.
I love that story.
Yeah. So that was really it. And it was really, that was the light bulb moment for me that was like, whoa, these things are valuable. And this is like a really esoteric little niche, black-footed pig ham, pata negra. It's like most of the world doesn't even know it exists. And this guy's willing to put some real value on the table for these domains.
Right.
Everybody in every business, in every walk of life, is going to want or need their domain. Mm-hmm. So that was sort of the moment. And this coincided with, my wife is German. When we married, she had said, like, I'm willing to live in the US for 4 years. And so I had like this shot clock, and that shot clock was running up, and I needed to come up with an idea of how I could make a living somewhere else. And I had a really good job. Like, I was making a lot of money. I was, in my 20s, making $300,000-$400,000 a year, way more than any of my friends were making. And so, it was a great job, and I knew that I was going to basically be walking away from it, really in the next year. And so um, I kind of thought, wow, maybe I can turn this into a business. And so I started being even more aggressive in buying more domains and learning about the industry.
And
And I
just wait,
realized,
side note, when you're
yeah,
saying you're buying these domains, where were you buying them from and how much were they?
yeah. So great question. So at that time, I didn't even know that there was an industry here, right? Like I was
Okay.
like, people buy domains for their business. They own one, maybe two. That's it. End of story.
Right.
I didn't know there was like domain collectors and there
Right.
was,
But was it like
auctions.
GoDaddy back then that just had
Yeah,
access
GoDaddy, but
to?
GoDaddy was relatively new on the scene, right? At
Okay.
that time, network solutions was kind of almost a monopoly.
Okay.
And yeah, GoDaddy was new on the scene. They were starting to grow quite rapidly. They had their provocative commercials coming on online, um, and the industry was kind of just starting to blossom. But I didn't even know it existed. Nevertheless, anybody else.
Mhm.
And but I happened to through a representative at GoDaddy, I learned that there was this whole industry. There's auction houses and there's forums, online forums, and people are sharing ideas and this thing is competitive and there's people drop catching and there's all these different facets of the business. And so I got really fascinated. I went deep down the rabbit hole, learned as much as I could, and I started buying more and more names, mostly in auctions. So these auctions, just to sort of clarify, when you let a domain expire, if that domain has any value whatsoever, and for it to not go to auction, it really has to be like garbage. If it has any value whatsoever, somebody's willing to buy it for some price, whether it's $10 or 10 grand.
Okay.
And so every day there are thousands and thousands of domains. I probably should know the number, but there's thousands, maybe tens of thousands of domains every day that go to auction across various platforms. There's maybe five major ones like dropcatch.com, GoDaddy, auctions, namejet.com, snapnames. Those are the major ones.
Right.
And people compete to buy these things. And back then they didn't go for a lot because there was only, let's say, a couple hundred people in the world that were involved in this business. Today, there's probably, I don't know, 10,000, that's a rough estimate.
Mhm.
Um, and there's probably a few hundred, maybe it's 300, 400 that are have really made an extremely successful career out of it.
Okay.
Not including like executives of big companies in the space, but I mean domain investors.
Mhm.
And so I started out just as another domain investor, and as I started accumulating domains, and I invested basically all of my savings into these things, uh, I realized who's selling them to the people that are actually going to use them, and there really wasn't anybody doing a great job of playing matchmaker between the people that have all these domains and the businesses that ultimately need them or should want them, whether they know it or not.